All right, in the interest of time, we are going to begin this session. Hello, everyone, and greetings from San Diego, California. Welcome to CSML Speaker Series, Thrive in a Knowledge-Based Economy. This is Leila Naderi. I'm the Director of Partnership Development at Alliant International University. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us to our March 3rd, 2021 CSML Speaker Series. So in today's technological world, data plays a critical role. Data without information and insights is useless and potentially dangerous. In this session, our speaker, Mr. Glen Hopkins, who is an expert and a leader within this field, will share insights on how you can not only survive, but also thrive in a knowledge-based economy. So here is the agenda for today. In the beginning, Dr. René Nayert, who is one of our outstanding professors at California School of Management and Leadership, will have a brief introduction to Alliant and CSML. Then we will introduce our speaker, Mr. Glen Hopkins, Senior Executive Advisor at HP Inc. And after his presentation, we will have a quiz Q&A. Please feel free to share your questions through chat box. We will monitor also the chat box, and we will share your questions if the time allows us towards the end. And of course, we will wrap up this session with final notes. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. René Nayert, professor at California School of Management and Leadership. Dr. Nayert?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Naderi. And I want to once again thank Mr. Hopkins for his willingness to provide the insight into this wonderful presentation. And I'd like to share with our viewers some information about Alliant International University. And to begin with, Alliant is actually a product of a merger between two great previous universities. Once was called United States International University, which had such notable faculty founders such as Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow, Viktor Frankl, Buckminster Fuller, Igor Ansoff, Max Lerner, Paul Hersey, Leland Gent Stanford, Ephraim Turbin, and Dr. Ernest Stichter. Most of these people were seminal thinkers in terms of the philosophies coming out of the late 20th century. And you may be aware or familiar with several of our very popular graduates, starting with the actor Jamie Foxx, who took lessons and played our pianos here in Green Hall before he started in show business. Also, California Governor Pat Brown was one of our alum. And we have both Leo McCarthy, the Lieutenant Governor, and Mervyn DeMille, who was another Lieutenant Governor, as graduates. Judy Chu, one of our most recent graduates, is also a member of the Congress as the House Representatives. And so we have several very famous and what we consider to be important alumni members. But the most important thing about the California School of Management and Leadership is that we believe that the fundamental purpose of organizations is to achieve its goals effectively and economically in its functionally oriented areas of disciplines. And our IS&T, that's an Information Systems and Technology discipline, is the one that I'm most happy about because I work with it daily. And I'm going to share with you some of the more general overview information regarding CSML. So as it says, CSML trains our students to have a competitive edge in the tech and qualitative fields. With our management and leadership degrees, you can learn to lead and mentor the next generation of professionals into the ever expanding arena of business and, uh, and help make your mark locally, nationally, and globally. So here's a list of our graduate programs, our doctoral programs, and our certificate programs. And you'll see that many of these programs are designed around the effective use of information systems technologies. And our two biggest and most attractive programs at this moment are MS in data analytics and healthcare analytics. So we also have a great doctoral business program in a PhD in leadership, as well as a database or doctoral business administration. And you can see the various certificate programs. Next slide, please. And our guest speaker this evening, we are fortunate to have the Senior Executive Advisor to Hewlett Packard Inc., Mr. Glen Hopkins. And he's the Senior Executive Advisor for HP. Prior to this position, he was the Chief Technology Officer and Global Head of HP Labs. In these roles, Glen helps drive the company's innovation strategy, new business incubation, and the overall advancement of HP's technical community. Glen joined HP in 1985 as a design and process engineer. Over the next 10 years, he progressed through various manufacturing and research and development engineering management jobs, including project manager, section manager, and department manager. Glen holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and chemical engineering. He holds a master's degree in physical chemistry from Oregon State University. And I'd just like to mention, I just flipped on my HP printer, and when I was mentioning Glen's name, it started to, lights were flashing and everything else. So I think he has a very good reputation among his products as well. So next slide, please. And I believe we're turning the presentation over to Mr. Hopkins. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Narrett. And so I will actually share now from my desktop. And are we seeing it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, it's wonderful to be here with you. I wish I could really be here with you all, so we'll just have to look to do that at some point in the future. But it's a really important topic, and it's going to be a high level overview of the topic. Some of this will just some of this, or maybe much of it, of this. Some of you will know. Some of it will be new. I'm not. My expertise per se isn't in data science or data analytics. You saw what my degrees are, but I certainly use it a lot, and I manage organizations that use it. And it's part and parcel of how we do work at HP. So I'll be talking about that and how I think it's super important for knowledge workers of the future. Just having a hard time advancing the screen. Okay, there we go. But first, let me give you a little bit of background, just my personal story. And before I even give that, I'll go back even further. My father made a very strong impression upon me because my great grandmother at the time, I grew up in the Bay Area of California, and my great grandmother, with her daughter, young daughter, which was my grandmother, they moved to San Francisco in late 1905. They came from Chicago by train. There's only two ways to get to San Francisco. One, in those days, it was by the Transcontinental Railroad, the one train and the one train track that made it from Chicago all the way to San Francisco, or you had to sail around, South America. And for those that know their history of California, 1905, 1906 was the big earthquake. So it was kind of bad timing on their part. There's famous stories about the trains at that time would have to just wait for hours as these massive buffalo herds would cross the tracks and the plains of the the West and the Midwest. And she lived in her arc of life. She started by, again, making that long, multiple day trek from the Midwest to San Francisco on one of the first trains that crossed the country and saw humans bouncing around on the moon. So as a young kid, I thought that was just incredible. Little did I know, I would have a similar type of arc with regards to technology. And my arc is that in this discourse, this is you have to be old to have these kinds of arc, but keep track of that because you're going to have your own arc, and you already have. When I started, when I was in high school, and certainly when I first started college, my first 2 years of college, we used something called a slide rule. Some of you have seen it. Some of you have heard of it. Some of you probably have never heard of it. It was a mechanical device that allowed us to do multiplication and division and subtraction, logarithms and such. A really clever handheld device, but it had its limitations. So in essence, it was before calculators. Um, and so when calculators came on, I mean, it was the craziest thing that any of us has seen, especially in the science and math communities. The ability to do, complex math with the push of a button. I became really enamored as a scientist and an engineer. I became enamored with the potential of this. And then computers started to come to being in their most rudimentary forms and showing up in really in two places primarily. One was in high level government laboratories and certain selected universities. And it was something that a lot of people in my cohort, if you will, engineers and scientists, didn't want anything to do with them. It was different, it was new. They were studying traditional classical chemistry or biology or mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. I took it upon myself to learn as much about it as I could. I taught myself how to program. I taught myself how to fix computers. And I've been really, as a professional, I've been associated with a lifelong learner in this space. And I think this is really, really crucial because if you look at me, starting my educational career, and then certainly not too long after that, I was in college for 10 years, by the way, but then starting in as a professional engineer at HP, computers were still just coming onto the scene. And now it seems so funny and so quaint, right? That that computers haven't always been here. We haven't always used them. They haven't always been valuable, and they haven't. But it's continuing to expand. The importance of not just computers, but the importance of data, big data, information, and the insights that come from it are really, really key to your professional arc, your professional growth, your ability to succeed and excel in the future. Let's look at some really key and interesting things, right? Data has been growing now exponentially for more than a decade, and it's just growing even, and it's an exponential curve. By the end of 2021, there'll be 75 zettabytes that exist in this world of data. And what's a zettabyte? They're having to come up with new names because the numbers are getting so much bigger. You can see a zettabyte is one followed by 18 zeros. It's going to double in 4 years, going from 75 zettabytes to 150 zettabytes. So the amount of data that is being generated in this world is just growing in ways that we can really, really have a hard time understanding and comprehending, but that we must to be able to take full advantage of that. And that is going to be your role as a knowledge. Everybody on this call is a knowledge worker. And so it'll be crucial in the present and the future for all knowledge workers to really embrace that and become really great students in all aspects of this. So you don't have to be a world-class expert in any specific one. Let's take a look at the beginning. As a discipline, business analytics didn't really get going, started to get going 30 years ago. And that's when personal computers started to become more ubiquitous for knowledge workers. For some of you oldsters, you'll remember the IBM PC, the Apple, the Apple Mac. HP had computers that were smaller and more, that could be used by individuals. And then Microsoft, which is what the MS stands for, came out with a program called Excel, which still exists today. Actually, there was other spreadsheet types of applications previous to that that got it going, but it was really Microsoft taking it to the next level, 1985, that changed the view of data and how data was used. Two major contributions after that that really started to bring data science into the common vernacular of professionals. Technology being used so much more broadly, and the advent of the internet. The internet was actually invented in the late or in the mid 50s, and it was used primarily by government and university researchers. And it wasn't until like the late 80s until a fellow put a front end on it that made it more accessible to the rest of society, which really generated the explosion of that. And then certainly as time has gone on, the idea of starting with very large centralized computing, because that was the only way you could do it, moving to things that are more personal computer to now computers that are in our pockets and our purses. This is with the advent then of the pure data professional. You'll have access to these slides, so I'm not going to go through any, into exhausting detail, but business and other entities really started to understand that the access to this volume of data was going to be a great source of new information, ideally, applying to new insights. Think of what Amazon has done to Sears and other brick and mortar companies. A lot of that has to do with data. Early adopters of it at the geopolitical level would be the NSA in the United States, the National Security Agency, which was out there, listening with, data, collecting it and trying to figure out what was going on in the world. Now it's become really, really ubiquitous. To make sense of these massive amounts of data, new skill sets arose, or professionals in these areas of data science and data analysts. Individuals that really had good understanding, excellent understanding, and economics acumen, consumer user insights, analytical skills, statistical skills, programming skills, machine learning skills. We'll talk about machine learning AI in a bit, data visualization, and more. And so this led to these specific areas, which you can get degrees in right now. But I will contend, and you can see that at the bottom, that all knowledge workers have to have elements of these skills. Our ability to be a high-end knowledge worker and to do something with that knowledge really requires that we can work in and around these aspects. And that we know what's available, what's possible, right? You don't have to be an expert in machine learning or AI, but as a knowledge worker professional, a high-end knowledge worker professional, you need to know what's possible there, what could be done, and to what ends and to what value, to determine whether or not you want to then enlist people in that arena or not, or become an expert in that arena, perhaps yourself. So what does a data analyst do that's different from, say, a data scientist? It's really a matter of focus areas and expertise. I talked about that in a second ago. I mean, both roles are expected to compose and write queries. Think about, a query is asking a question. I'm looking for, an answer to a specific thing. And the more sophisticated the query, the more sophisticated the work that has to go on behind it. Work with engineering teams to source the right data. This is because you're out there now, and today you're going out to the internet, essentially, or specifically, actually, and looking for very specific information in that 75 terabytes to 75 going to 100. So that's really not that easy. In most cases, a data analyst is not expected to build the sophisticated statistical models or be hands-on in machine learning or advanced program arenas. That's more on the data science side. But really, like I said, versed in things like structured query language, perhaps, or similar databases or other business intelligence tools and packages. You really, and I'm going to talk a lot, to mention this multiple times during this, during this conversation with you, is don't be subservient to this, that information out there. Be able to get the more you can get yourself, the more powerful you will be. The more what's out there that you want, and who can get it for you, the more powerful you will be yourself as a knowledge leader. This is a real important slide. It's the simpler slides are typically the most important ones. This is the progression. This is the progression of of your expertise. This is a progression of the value you as a knowledge worker will be able to generate in this world, in this space. Data, information, insights. It all starts with data, right? Well, okay, what is the data that we're looking for? What is the data that exists? What might we do with that data? How does it relate to whatever it is we're trying to do or might want to do in the future, right? You're trying to turn that collection of data, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you're trying to turn that then into some sort of information, right? Which is you can relate it to something and you can share that with others that can relate it to something. So instead of a collection of things, it has something with meaning, something with value. But the highest portion of this is the insight. And these things are the hardest things to come by. Okay, well, what is it really telling us? What might we really do? And you'll see this a lot. People tend to be very, very comfortable with providing information, providing a graph, if you will, or some sort of, something that says, okay, that's interesting, but is it profound? What's the insight? Why is the world going to care about this? Why should the world care about this? Why should I care about that? Give that a lot of thought in your travels. Let's talk about big data. And like I said, big data is really, really exploding all around us. Folks talk about in this space, the three V's: volume. The more, the better, right? So, which is, and there's, so the more data is better, and to the point where you don't know what to do with it, or you're doing bad things with it. And that's where you'll hear them talk a lot about good data versus bad data. Bad data is data that is not usable, or it's not verifiable, or it doesn't have the right level of veracity behind it. In other words, you trust it. So there's a lot of work that has to go. It says, okay, how do I get the right, how do I make sure I'm working with good data to come up with good information, to come up with good insights? Consist of structured and unstructured data, and I'll talk about what the difference is of those in a second. It can be megabytes, terabytes, petabytes. Again, so talking, megabytes is still, fairly large, but it's not tremendously large. When you get into terabytes and petabytes, you're talking about a ton of data, and that's where the next term comes in: velocity, the rate at which this data is received and acted upon. Normally, the highest velocity data streams go directly into memory versus being written to a disk. And think in this terms as, okay, into memory because we're going to act upon it right now, as opposed to written to a disk and we'll get to it later and I'll try and understand it. An example of this will be like when you're on, you're shopping, right? Online shopping, and you're seeing things that you're doing something, and all of a sudden you're seeing certain ads or certain things pop up in a window. That's information. That's real-time data being crunched, being acted upon to send you some certain type of information. When you do a Google map, right, which is, okay, I want to go from point A to point B. That is a deterministic approach in one sense, because it says, okay, you're here and you want to go there, but then it determines that mapping program will then determine what the fastest route is, or the different routes are. And that is where then machine learning starts to come into play, because it's the machine learning algorithms are taking stock of whatever information has been generated at the time, right? Which is traffic is backing up. There's an accident over here, or you just missed the turn, and now I'm going to reroute you. Those are aspects of machine learning and machine learning algorithm sucking in a lot of data, not only about you, but about the area of interest of where you're going. Artificial intelligence is something that, like a self-driving car. Now, all of a sudden, the risks go up dramatically. It's not about me trying to, reroute you on this road versus that road, shave off, 2 minutes here, or have you avoid this area of town. It has to make, if you have a self-driving automobile, it has to make life and death decisions in microseconds. Humans do that, and humans do a pretty good job of that. Humans also make mistakes. Machines and algorithms that do that have to be very, very high end. They can't be connected to something else. For example, oh, gee, you're in a bad spot. I don't have a connection. And they have to be really, really sophisticated, which is why you see, a lot of interest in artificial intelligence for things of that nature. Lots of things that people worry about and should with artificial intelligence. And there's a limit to what these machines can do. They're not humans, and they don't have human brains, and they won't for our lifetimes, I can assure you. And then the variety of the data that we have to work with. Again, is it structured, fits into nice, nice relational databases, or it's unstructured, and we have to try and make sense of it. Big data specialists and general skills, they have these analytical skills, creativity, what do I do with this information, mathematical and statistical skills. You all have these things. What you want to do is you want to embrace them, and you want to continue to improve them. You have computer science skills. How deep you want to go into this field will determine how much you yourself want to access the information and manipulate it, or how much you were going to have others do it for you. I mean, this is, again, you're being trained to be leaders, leaders of people, leaders of organizations. So you find, you're going to find what you will have to decide over time what you will do yourself and what you will do with others. But you have to really understand that full ecosystem to be at the top of your game. And then certainly for a lot of us on this call, it's business skills. But I argue, and I talk about this in my very last slide, but everything's about business. Even it's economics, macro and microeconomics. A university is a business. It's in the business of teaching students, yourselves. But if it can't pay the bills, then it doesn't exist. And for it to pay the bills, it has to think and act like a business. The government is a business. Many times a very poorly run business, but nevertheless, it still is a business that has to find ways to make ends meet to the best of its ability. A couple of examples of big data. Financial services. If you look at that, it's there's a tremendous amount going on behind that credit card of yours, and how it's used and how you use it and how it could be used more. Customer analytics, compliance analytics, fraud analytics, operational analytics. It's a mega billion-dollar industry with a lot going, like I said, a lot going on. That is there to make sure that you can do what you need to do, when you want to do, how you want to do with a credit card, virtual currency. I mean, think about how crazy that concept is, that we just completely take it for granted. And then a lot of bad guys out there that are trying to steal that virtual currency, from you and the financial systems. Big data and communications, right? Just how, again, things that we take for granted, right? These phones and computers and our wallets and our pocketbooks that we use as we use as computers, we use as entertainment, we use to talk, we use to tech, we use it to get us from point to A to B. There's a lot going on there, a lot of data being generated, and a lot of that data being used. Just to give you a little flavor again, so data science and the complexity of it. This is structured and versus unstructured, and the unstructured data is something that's really fairly new. So over the last 10 years, think in terms of text, audio, video, imaging, all kinds of disparate amount of data that in itself doesn't mean a lot, but then combined in different ways can be then turned into structured information, which you see on the left, visually, database or customer relationship management, enterprise resource planning. But the combination of the two become very, very powerful to solve all kinds of problems or create all kinds of new opportunities. And so that's the inside of this big data. Like the more we can get, the more people can get. What do you do with it? How do you ultimately turn into structured data of some nature? So it has a lot to do with data extraction, data cleansing. Like I said, the good data versus the bad data, and then analyzing it. And in terms of combination of your classical, really classical skills, the classical in a sense that these things haven't changed. And maybe the wording is a little different, the emphasis is a little bit different, but there's still things that were being taught well before computers and the rest of this came on the scene. Statistics, mathematics, programming, analyst discovery and validation. So data scientists basic skills. So these are the people that, okay, this is the ones that said, this is my life. I'm going to become a world-class expert at really going out into that, and that's 150 petabytes of information. Actually, it's not information, it's data. And then be able to extract, get it, we'll find it, get it, pull it, do something with it, get it in front of others that can analyze it and maybe generate insights, or they themselves can do the also participate in the analysis and insights as well. Just depends on where they want to spend their energy and where their skills are. But these folks and the high end folks here, these will be people that do the machine learning, AI algorithms, the web crawlers, and things of that nature. So they typically have at least an MS degree. A lot of them have PhD degrees. Really in-depth knowledge of things like statistical analysis software or other programs. The ability to code. Like I told you, right, one of the best things I ever did was I learned to code. When it was really becoming was really just and it just was new to world, and it was hard. But it really differentiated me early in my career. And though I don't code anymore, because of the fact I know how to code and I did code, I can talk to coders and I know what's possible. And a lot of times, as a leader, a business leader, and a people leader, I know when they say, "Well, that's not possible." I go, "I know it's possible. You just don't want to do it." And I go, "Okay, you're right. It's possible." And you're right. I don't want to do it. And I go, "I know. We've settled that. So let's just go do it now." But coding language like Python, which is one of the easiest of the languages to code in, is something all of you could learn if you want, and very valuable in this space. Some other ones are Java, C++ would be for the more advanced folks. Things like you might hear about Hadoop platform or Hive and Pig. These are software platforms that are used to be able to work with very large amounts of data and to be able to manipulate that data. Just make sure you understand the language at least, the vernacular, so that you can have a legitimate, higher level conversation with people in this space, and understand how it can be used for whatever area you're interested in. You're not going to belabor this slide, but applications of data science, internet search, recommender systems, digital advertising, it's all around you. And pay attention. It's all around you. Make sure you just become a student of the world around you. You learn so much by just paying attention to what's coming across you at any given day. This slide is important because you'll hear this a lot: inference and inference engines. And so an inference the definition of an inference, and it's a real important one, is a conclusion or an opinion that is based upon known facts or evidence. It doesn't mean that conclusion or that opinion is factual, right? It's an estimation. And so this is really, really prevalent in the world of big data and data. And statistics is people make inferences all the time, and a lot of times there's a fair amount that those inferences are incorrect, even though the data that was being pulled from it was factual. There's a couple of examples, right? Jennifer hears her mailbox close, close, and her dog barking. Jennifer can infer that the postal carrier has delivered her mail. That's a good inference. It's logical. It's not factual. I mean, you don't know for a fact that that's what happened. And so you guys, all of you see this a lot, in your, in your internet experiences, right? Which is you're looking for a product, and then and then you get, well, people that bought this, you might also like this, or others like, that kind of information, which sometimes is right and sometimes is not so right. Or you're getting something. Well, I bought this thing like 2 weeks ago. Why are you still sending me that information? These are all examples. Those are both examples of inference, inference algorithms and inference engines. An analyst, needs programming skills, ideally. Not really ideally, for sure. You need programming skills. Now, I talk about, things like R, which is a code, or Python, which is really writing code, but Excel. If you can do Excel, and if you can't, you're going to have to take a class in it, because it's really crucial. If you understand Excel and you can do Excel, you know how to code, because Excel is a form of code and coding, and it can be taken to very, very high levels. Really become, and you have to understand statistics and the mathematics behind it. It is all well within our capability on this call. And there's a lot of important things that come from good statistics. There's a lot of inappropriate things that come from inappropriate statistics. Know what can be, what's machine learning about, what's AI about, where is it applicable, where isn't it? Data wrangling skills, which is dealing with raw data, how to manipulate it, and then communication and visualization skills. Professionals really, really struggle with this, is to be able to present information in a way that others can really understand it, act upon it, ideally get insights from it. Running out of time, so I'm going to skip a couple slides here, but okay, where is this all going? Am I confusing you, scaring you, or hopefully really starting to motivate you and give you direction? And just to give you some more concrete examples about becoming a data-driven professional. Be really careful of these traps with regards to, creating inappropriate information from maybe bad data and from bad insights. It's break it down into collecting the information, organizing it, presenting it. You can see that chart on the right, which is where people get tripped up on generating data, bad or biased sampling, loaded questions, faulty polling, processing the data, cherry picking, right? Be real, bias. Everybody has bias. We hear that a lot these days, but make sure, in this arena, right, which is you're fact-based, you're a professional, you're a knowledge-based professional. You may have a hypothesis or you might have a belief, but the data has to fit. And if it doesn't, then you have to examine your belief or your position. So cherry picking data is really a problem, and make sure the significance and the quality is really good. And again, the communication of it. I have a couple of examples here that to drive this point home. Those that may be students of American literature history will recognize that top line, which is lies, damn lies, and statistics. I didn't say it. Mark Twain, which was a famous satirist back in the day, came up with it. I mean, this was back in the 1800s, I believe, or early 1900s. And he was just frustrated by how people used back in those days, how they were using statistics, really, really inappropriate. On the right-hand side, you can see a graph there from USA Today, common injuries, that children suffer. 5.2%, spinal injuries. That's a scary number. If you got children, that is pretty damn scary. And it's true, but it's not. It's taken out of context. And what you see really is that the real chance of this happening to a child, is that lots of zeros, 3%, based on 2,000 injuries per 74 million children per year. So yes, it happens. And 2,000 sounds like a large number, and it is. And if you're the individual or you're impacted by it, it's a big deal. But it's also the likelihood of this happening are very, very small. And in today's news, you see this game played quite a bit. You also see lots of mistakes or lots of falsehoods around correlation and causation. Correlation does not mean causation. It does not. And so they can exist, but causation is explicitly applies to cases where action A causes outcome B, explicit, factually. And to drive that point home are a couple of things that you may have seen because they've been out, out in the wild here for a while to drive this point home, which is the first one on the top is the number of people who have drowned by falling in a swimming pool and correlated to films Nicolas Cage has appeared in. That one has a 66% correlation, which is pretty decent, not great. The one below has a much tighter correlation, which is per capita cheese consumption correlated to the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. Correlated? Yes. Causation? We don't think so. This one is one of bias with regards to polling. The verbs that have been used, might have been used, contacted, hit, bumped, collided, smashed. So this is a way that, this would be a form of confirmation bias, if you will. There's an answer that I'm looking for. I'm going to set it up such I get it. I'm going to end with this slide, and maybe a little bit provocative for some, but you're university students. You need to be provocative. It's about money. These are my opinions, by the way, which I feel free to push back on. It's about money. It always has been. I think it probably always will be. Become a great lifelong student of facts, data-driven macro and microeconomics. Really, really understand micro and macroeconomics. Everything that happens around us has it balled up inside of it, and very few people truly understand it. Don't let yourself be one of those. There's a reason why the free market works. It's an economic approach that ruthlessly goes after inefficiencies and rewards innovations. It does need help. It needs a guiding hand, but boy, is it a system. Like I said, if there's an inefficiency to be exposed, it does, and it really, if there's ways to find a better way, it will. People will. Without gold miners, there never would have been a gold rush. That makes sense, but it was not actually the gold miners that ultimately made the most amount of money. Think in terms of brain versus brawn, insights, information over nuggets. It was gold nuggets back in the day. Data are nuggets. They're the gold, but the money is in the information, the insights. The data is just a precursor to that. Become a great student, a passionless logic, right? I love passionate people, and they're, you have belief structures and you want things certain, very, badly, but you have to really check that and question and reflect upon everything of importance. The world is not the way you think it should be. I'm guessing because I have yet to meet someone that thinks it is. But I will tell you my opinion, you will never get it there unless you truly understand how this world got here in the first place. Really, again, logic, just passionless. What are the real facts? And then finally, and I say this to a lot to young people because I worry about it because of everything going around in the world, because of social media and whatnot. Be super excited about the future because there's never been more opportunity for people in this world than there is right now, ever. The world has never been clawing its way out of extreme poverty at the rate it is now. And what's that doing? And what that is doing is it's putting pressure on the economic systems, the established economic systems that have been in place for ever since World War II, the end of World War II, and it's putting pressure on our environmental systems. It's putting pressure in other places. But really, isn't that the problem? And I cross out. Isn't that the challenge that we really wanted to have? Was a world that is really progressing, pulling itself out of poverty, and being able to create new opportunities for themselves and for the ones that will come after us. So with that, what future will you create? And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Glenn. That was great. I'm glad also when you mentioned deep, passionate logic. It's something that I personally believe was part of my research also, leading with mind and heart. It's important to use both of them actually when it comes to lead within any field that we want to make an impact.
Yes.
Dr. Nair, do you have any comments or questions at this point?
Yes, first of all, I really appreciated the entire presentation. It was spot on in so many different areas in which we work with our students. And one of my biggest questions, and it might be something that you've already pretty well dealt with, Glenn, is usually our students that I deal with come in two varieties in terms of interest. We have the real techie nerds who don't want to be bothered with any type of business oriented materials. And then we have just the flip side with the others where the pure business oriented students really try to avoid the technical side. And I see this in most of my classes, especially the ones in which we have representation from both groups. And I have tried many times, and not as eloquently or anywhere near so as what you've just explained. So, uh, in addition to the materials that you've provided us this evening, I'm wondering, have you dealt with situations like this with that split within your work environment where you have those who are totally attracted to technology? Like in my younger days, and you can probably relate to this, we used to just put the programmers in a room, throw a bunch of candy bars and Coke in there, and then let them pound out code all day. But they couldn't communicate very effectively with the business types. And I think it was that miscommunications between these two different interest groups that made it difficult to really appreciate the benefit of an integrated usage of the technology in a business environment. Do you deal with that at all in the real world?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is a real world uh, issue and challenge. A term that we use is we call it a T-shaped knowledge worker, a knowledge professional, right? So so your trunk is kind of maybe your area of expertise, but the T is the broadening out of these other skill sets.
Oh,
And you really, as an individual, you have to decide, you're a professional. Now it's a question of what level of professional do you want to be. If you're going to be very, very narrow in your approach, you're going to have to be really, really good. And that's going to have to be a lot and people are going to have to value that. But mostly in general in this world is it's a combination of an expertise in a given area and then these broader skill sets. Like I said, I had 10 years. My role in HP turned out to be the commercialization of technology, the ability to take advanced technology, invent it, innovate it, prototype it, commercialize it, make money from it on a mass scale, on a global scale. I had 10 years of college. It was math and science and physics and engineering and computers. And so in retrospect, I go, wow, I never took, I should have taken psychology classes, sociology classes, economics classes, business classes. I had to learn all that on my own to be a more well-rounded, professional. And this is why, I made that provocative statement. And some people, I'm sure some people kind of recoiled from it because but it's about money, and it's always about money. And so it's like if you don't understand, economics, or macroeconomics, how money gets made. Why is someone going to pay you to do what? Why are they going to pay you? Because they're going to pay you. There's an economic equation there, and so to really, really be, decide where you want to be, you have to understand that. Now, I will tell you, the people that I see happiest in this life are the ones whose expectations and efforts are matched. And the most unhappy people I see are the ones whose expectations and efforts are not matched. So if your expectation, so decide where you want to be in that professional scale. Where are you going to derive your satisfaction from? But then put the energy in place. But I would say this world, I think, is demanding more of these T-shaped knowledge workers that have capability and experience and skills in both the business world, economic world, interpersonal skills world, communication world, as well as the technology world, or
Thank,
vice versa, right? Okay, my trunk is technology, then I have these other skills. My trunk is business, and then so I have my branches are technology.
thank you very much. Really hits the nail on the head and provides me with another insight as to how I may be able to better condition my students to be thinking in terms of the trunk. Not only, excuse me, not just a trunk, but having these other areas. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Glenn. One question actually I see one of our participants is asking, what is the best way to think about how to gather data from around the world for research studies? I remember you mentioned about collecting data, how there's a danger of having bad data or biased data. So
Yeah.
what do you suggest in terms of the best way of collecting data for research purpose to get the best result, and helps us with better decision making also as a result of it?
Yeah, I mean it's a very situational answer depending on where you are in your journey and the sophistication of it. But I'll give you a real life example. For example, a great source of the verifiable data is it's called the world data. It's a world data source. It's a website that you can go on, and they collect a whole lot of data. And they have a tremendous amount, like say for COVID, right? Which is they break it down by every single country or in the state, and how many people have it, and the rate of by month and whatnot. And so that's like, okay, and it's been established, or John Hopkins as well for COVID. So these are like trusted entities that you can with reasonable certainty say, okay, the data that they have is probably pretty good. And then what you can do is you can pull that, right? You can actually just do a copy and paste and pull that into an Excel spreadsheet. And so now everyone on this phone has those skills, right? So that's an example of saying, okay, how do I get going on this? I'm more worried in this conversation. I'm more worried about the non-data scientist than the data scientist. The world, I mean, this is in my arc, right? When I went to college, right, which is, they taught us okay, here's the library. Here are the research, librarians. This is the card catalog. This is how you look for information, right? And if it's not in this library, then you go to them and they order from somewhere else. And that was like a life skill, the Dewey Decimal System. And so now in this day and age is you got, there is that, 75, petabytes of data out there. How are you going to go get it? Where is it? What is it? I mean, that would be like, back in our day, is, well, why would I ever go to a library? Why do I need the library? I don't know. Why would I need to use a library? It's nonsensical back then, and it's nonsensical today if you don't have pretty high-end skills of being able to go out and get data and information on the internet yourself, and then augmenting it with other professionals.
Absolutely, and I think this actually become even more critical when we were dealing actually with the data receiving regarding even the pandemic, throughout the last year. It's just like, I think it's very important also as consumer of those data, how much we need to be really curious, and also be willing to take, dig deeper actually, to make sure that the way that, whether news or politicians or different groups, they are interpreting data to us is in a way that is just, it's based on fact, and it's just not just one side of the story. It's because the context, as you mentioned, the context matters. I know we are running out of time, and we have time for one question. Dr. Naid, I see a question in the chat box. Would you like to read that question as a final question?
Yes, this was actually from Dr. George Schluter, and who's very interested in technology. But one of the questions that he was interested in is the volume of data is indeed growing at a fast pace. So A, how do you view the impact of emerging digital technology methodologies? And B, do you see hope that digital technologies don't just add to the data, but actually automate the data interpretation process?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very deep question. I think that we're being overloaded. I think as humans, we're being overloaded with data, and we're over-indexed on data. Right now, we're over-indexed on data and under-indexed on information and under-indexed on insights. I think we're running into a very dangerous position where that the veracity of information is really I think it is incredibly questionable now. And you see this, this is, in the United States, right? It was that fourth institution really the fourth institution of government was a free and objective press. And they had a process, right? Which is, a very methodical process of which is, okay, if I didn't have 3 verifiable sources, then I can't run this piece because I don't know, I can't prove veracity. I can't prove that it's true. And so now we have every human being on this planet, blasting out whatever that gets that's data, but it's not necessarily good data, or it's not verified. And so I think we have to really, this is where I think, like I said, man, we as, the knowledge workers, certainly, but, how do we harness this, but then be careful about what we're doing with it? And are we having a fact-based conversation, a logic-based conversation? Or are we having an emotional conversation that is being used to drive a belief or an opinion? And that, to me, is the challenge that society has upon it right now. And I don't know that anybody knows how to deal with it yet.
Thank you very much, Glenn. We really appreciate the answers, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Naderi.
Oh, thank you so much, Glenn. I know we have more questions, but we want to be also mindful to the time. We only have a couple more minutes. I want to just open up for you as well as Dr. Naid for any final comments. Dr. Naid, would you like to begin?
Yeah, first of all, I just thought this was the most pressing concept that needs to be presented to our students. The entire realm of Glenn's presentation is so important for them planning their careers ahead. In fact, what future will you create should be one of our bylines as we begin introducing our students to any of these professional activities. So thanks once again, Glenn, for that insight.
You're welcome. Dr. Shooter has his hand raised. We should.
Yes. Do you have time?
I have time. Yeah.
Okay, maybe actually, yes. Ask it. Just a second. Let me, even if I can give him access to talk, actually. Let me, in this case, we could hear him as well. All right. Hello to talk. Dr. Schluter, I think you can talk right now. Would you like to?
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Again, that was a very good presentation. I enjoyed it. And I especially enjoyed you making the connection between data analysis and dealing with data and economics. I come out of the technical field and have also an MBA, and I teach primarily economics as a nuclear physicist. But I enjoy the watching the growth of the data and what's being done with data and how the data is now being prepared for business managers. And so my main interest right now is in these digital technologies and the methodologies that evolve there. One very exciting technology is process mining, where the business executives don't get data on their table anymore, but they get processed data and business opportunities based on the data. And this process mining is just a fantastic technology. It is emerging, it is new, and I do appreciate the concern that you have. And particularly, I noticed that you said that computers do not think, but at the same time, you also mention machine learning and deep machine learning. And, how do you view the tremendous progress being made in machine learning, and where does that take us?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly, machine learning and AI have, its place in being able to automate things at a rate that,
Right.
Humans just couldn't do, right? Which is, we'll go, well, machine learning is creating all kinds, I'll go back to my car analogy, right? Well, it really helps me, reduce reduce the time I get from point A to point B and whatnot. Automated, or driverless, cars would save thousands and thousands of lives, right? Because not that they can think better than humans, but humans get very distracted. And so those are types of good things, for those. Turning other things over to artificial intelligence. And remember, all these things are just the constructs of human brains, right? Algorithms, right? Machine learning algorithm, an AI algorithm, right?
Yes.
And so, turning, really, really important things over to AI systems that was programmed by flawed humans, I would say, let's think twice, think twice about that. To me, it's, really just not losing sight, though. I'll go back to the logic of, in this combination of technology, and this will be my wrap up comments. Just being excited about the future, and really, like I said, the world has never been climbing itself out of poverty at the rate it is now, unprecedented in human history. The world, even with this pandemic, it's never been safer in this world today in its history ever. We worry about so many things, right? And I'm a nuclear physicist as well, nuclear chemistry, but we don't use water, we just borrow it. We have no shortage of water on this planet. We want to keep it clean, but we know how to make it clean. Energy is abundant. We would like more clean energy versus, energy that generates, CO2, which is why I like nuclear. I actually like nuclear power. Huge advocate of nuclear power, which is really, really out of vogue these days, because it has the ability to generate very, very clean energy at very economical prices, and it can be done safe. Versus, because they've made tremendous strides. And here in San Diego, General Atomics has done some really great work. So these are the types of things that, to me, just as, again, the people of our walk, looking at this both technically and economically, and so, from a societal perspective, what are the right logical answers, for us to get behind, to do one thing I think we all want, which is to have a better and more prosperous future for the people that come behind us. There are solutions there, but there's a lot of like I said, we need more passionless logic, and be able to embrace things that though they may have concerned us in the past, actually have a lot of viability in the future.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate the bridge that you are making between data and sustainability. And I like the term that we borrow the water. We need to come to the point where we only borrow the natural resources rather than consuming them.
Yeah, it's equilibrium. For the scientists, we'll call it bringing the world into equilibrium, which we can do. The reason it's struggling, like I said, the reason it's struggling right now, if you look at the carbon footprint generation, say of Western Europe and the United States, it's coming down dramatically. That's not the problem. Or the problem, or I'll call it the challenge, is places like China and India, that it's growing substantially. Well, why? Well, because they're industrializing at unprecedented rates. They're pulling hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Is that a bad thing? No, that's a great thing. But so we have to help find solutions. We don't want China and India to go take 50, 60, 70 years to get from one source of energy to different sources of energy or sustainability that it took us in the West to do.
Right.
So we have to recognize that they're going through a similar progression.
Yeah.
So okay, that's a very logical conversation to have, and we should be able to have it and work through it in a way that allows the developed economies to have the lifestyles that they have come accustomed to and desire, but also allow for the large majorities of other people on this planet that aspire to those lifestyles to be able to get there and keep the planet and make sure the planet's in equilibrium.
I just wanted to mention, Glenn,
Thank you very
that
much.
Dr. Schluter was a longtime nuclear physicist with General Atomics, and he has really enjoyed his career there. As I've mentioned to my students, if you see George in person, you'll see he still glows from his time at General Atomics.
I love it. I love it. Well, then I test these I love thought experiments, right? So, and again, I know a lot of people are really just adamantly opposed to nuclear power, but I like it because it's controversial. I like it because it's provocative. I also like it because I think it could be a huge solution for us. But the thought process, I say, okay, I'm going to ask all of you right now, which is a thought experiment. Well, how would you feel about putting a nuclear power plant in downtown San Diego? And of course, the answer for most, that is crazy. There's absolutely no way. But yet, when you look across the bay and you see a couple of those nuclear power aircraft carriers sitting there, you say, well, they already are there, and they've been there for many, many years.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much. I enjoyed listening and talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schluter, for joining us and for your insightful questions as well. So I think at this point, we want to be mindful to our participants' time. It's just, and as well as also a speaker's time. Thank you so much, Glenn. That was a really a wonderful presentation. Thank you also for the end. When you basically emphasize on the silver lining also. It's just like, with all the challenges we are facing, but also currently as a world, we are in a better situation than ever we have been throughout the history. So hopefully this is a good message for our participants and attendees, especially our students, that they are planning their future and their career as well. And with that being said, I would like to appreciate each and every one of you who joined today. Thank you, Dr. Nayert and Dr. Schluter as well. So hopefully you can join us for the next CSML speaker series on April 7th, 4:30 Pacific time. We will actually update you with the speaker and topic. We are really grateful to Mr. Glen Hopkins for his expertise and also generously sharing your time and your insights with us. Hopefully you all learned many great lessons from this presentation. I myself, I can say, quite a bit, was in many levels was so enlightening for me. And I want to actually finalize with first of all, with the question you can see on his slide: what future will you create? So with everything, with all the resources you have access, and also with the knowledge, with your own personal unique capabilities, think about what kind of future will you contribute and will you create. And with that being said, thank you so much, everyone, and have a good one. See you at the next CSML speaker series next April 7th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great, Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nayed and Dr. Schluter.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Leela, for putting on these programs. Very thought-provoking and enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.